1, go.
All right, Jean, I have a question. I was really intrigued about, I forgot, maybe it was Saint Teresa of Avila who said this in her book, that there are people who are in the higher mansions who, and I don't think she mentioned who that person was. I suppose that person was already in the seventh mansion and then he fell. When a person in the higher mansions, I was really interested, what happens to them? What happens to them? Do they go back to square one? Are they, because talking about the mansion, people are outside the mansion. If somebody, and of course, I will not understand how somebody acts or thinks who is in the higher mansion because, that's a different league, it's a higher league. So I don't know if they are still capable of sinning, but since Saint Teresa or Saint John of the Cross mentioned that, and they were so sad about the person, what happens to a person who does fall? God forbid, but if somebody fell, do they go back to square one or even square zero, and then they have to go back again to what happens to the growth that they have already gone through?
Okay.
Yeah, so that's my question.
Okay, that's a legitimate question. First and foremost, I would like to say very quickly that Saint Teresa of Avila, throughout her writing, description of the growth going mansion after mansion in her book, The Interior Castle, she constantly mentions the fact that it's possible to go back, that the mansions are opened, they communicate between themselves, and it's a slope, so if you don't grow, you inevitably go backward. This is valid in all mansions, and against and unexpectedly, against maybe a common sense or unexpectedly, she talks about this in the seventh mansion. And she says, she's very unexpected in a way, but this is how she did it. In the seventh mansions, you have 4 chapters, and in one of them, I don't remember which them right now, but in one of them, she clearly mentions Solomon. Solomon, the king in the Old Testament, is said to have started very well, but finished very badly in the sense that he's married non-Jews, non-Jewish women, sorry, and that he ended up worshipping, building temples for their own gods and worshipping their gods just to please his wives or concubines, I don't know. I'm not expert in that. So it's very shocking in a way, humanly speaking, to find that Teresa of Avila waits for the entire book to reach the 7 mansions and then mention to us that, yes, be careful, we need to be prudent all the time, awake, vigilant, etc. She never explains or never says anything about what would happen if this, God forbid, occurs. She never mentions it. I would like to say, this is me talking, not her, for now, but then I'll come back to her. I'd like to mention, for instance, something that we sometimes forget. Adam himself, our father Adam. I know that talking about Adam for some people, it's like, but he never existed, etc. No, okay. Accept that I talk about Adam as a real person. His state in the beginning is a total friendship with God, living in the presence of God and in the union with God. And despite that, Adam didn't obey. So we see the possibility without the following events of incarnation, redemption, etc. We see it already happening in the beginning. Now, I don't have I don't have a sharp answer, but I can say something that is, I don't know if it gives an answer or partially an answer. It's not totally directly the answer, but it's something very close to it. In the Seven Mansions, which is a masterpiece, these 4 chapters, this is me talking here, I consider them as a masterpiece. Even though you have always the impression when she writes that she's not well organized, nothing is prepared, she just talks spontaneously, she remembers something, she opens the parentheses, and three paragraphs below she continues and resumes what she was saying, etc. But these 4 chapters are a masterpiece. Now, in these chapters, she says something very interesting. 2 things, at least. She says, it is very important for the people who are there in the Seven Mansions or united with God, having this experience, this twofold vision, as she calls it, of the Trinity and of the incarnate God. She said it's very important for them to remember the people who are in the first mansions in their prayers. And she says that this act is an act of great mercy. I see, this is me talking, a very interesting connection she makes between the 2 ends, the highest end and the lowest end. Reaching the highest end, paradoxically, this is me talking, but I prolonged a little bit her thought, her thinking. I think that being in the 7 mansions, paradoxically, is in fact drawing the human being closer to the people who are in the first mansions. I'm not saying they sinned and they went back, no. I'm saying that their state puts them in a greater closeness to the first ones, to the beginning, to the sinners, to the people who are away from God. It looks like a paradox, but it's not when you think properly, when you think of it. So the highest level of holiness, paradoxically, doesn't extract us from normal life or doesn't make us go further from people, or more precisely from the sinners, but paradoxically draws us closer to the sinners. Remember Saint Dominic, I don't know if you know about that, Saint Dominic apparently used to always to say, my God, we're the merciful God and the sinners. What will happen to the sinners? You see? I think the more we are transformed into God, because what is union? Is to be not only purified, illumined, but also transformed. It's like the spirit becomes the fire itself, or almost of God. You have back this shape and beauty of God himself. So it tells you something about God himself, how God is close to the sinner and wants the salvation of the sinner. You see? So I think this aspect is very important. When we say God became incarnate, and when we say God suffered and died for us in the person of Jesus, we say that we are saying that, yeah, sorry for the interruption. What I was trying to say is that the incarnation, God becoming, taking flesh, taking a human nature, is in fact a movement of always getting closer and closer to the human being. And the human being is first and foremost sinner. Remember the passage of Isaiah chapter 11, people who are in the darkness, walking in the darkness and the land of death, saw a great light. This is our life. This is the description of the history of humanity. We are walking in the darkness in the land of death, and the great light came in and became incarnate. But that light became clearer and clearer during the Passion. So the descent that started with the incarnation, by the incarnation, continued until it reached the death of Jesus. And the death of Jesus is almost a death in us, the sinners. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because you asked a question about the seven mansions, and the tendency is to consider the seven mansions as something very high up. While the paradox is that the seven mansions is something very deep down in the human being, following the Son of God, who became Son of Man and wanted to achieve or realize redemption. Do you think the person who is united to Jesus, the Redeemer, will not have as first and foremost mission to do the same thing? Of course it will. So sin coming from our own sinfulness, I'm answering now a little bit your question, or sin coming from the sinfulness of our brothers and sisters, it's not the same. I accept that, no discussion about that. I'm not saying that. But it's still sin. And you still have to deal with that sin. Think of Saint Teresa of the Child Jesus in the last year and a half of her life. She's, in my humble opinion, very certainly in the seventh mansions. But where is she exactly? She's sitting on the table of the sinners and eating with them, she says. So the paradox is that our conception of our understanding is still a little bit human of the seven mansions. It's a little bit human in the sense that we see it as something, wow, like we reached the top of the mountain. Like a novice said to Therese one day, she said, oh, I want to reach the top of the mountain, not talking about the ascent of Mount Carmel, for instance, or the mountain of Transfiguration. It's easy, it's that mountain, no other mountain. Therese said, okay, yeah, but we need to go down, 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 down. So it's not about going up, but about going down. So here's the paradox. Are we reading properly the seven mansions? Are we reading properly the living flame? And I think that this is the challenge today, to sort of have a conversion of the way we read these things. So coming back to your question, if you think, let us admit that the person is not sinning. Let us admit that. I will add some more things right after. Do you think the person is not dealing with sin? The person is swimming in sin. I'm talking of about the person who is not sinning, but who is swimming in the sin of the others. So this is why I think that deeply, it's not I think, I deeply believe that the seven mansions are directly connected with the early mansions. Teresa of Avila says it in a way. She says, please don't forget. And sometimes she says, I'm quoting the seven mansions. She says, sometimes God allows the beasts or the animals, the venomous animals of the first mansions to be there totally surrounding the person. Read it the way you want. Read it the way you want. But at least what it says is what? It's like I have the impression that you are back in the first mansions. Now, is it coming from your own sin, or is it coming from a weakness, or is it coming from a fault or an error, or is it coming really from a sort of a communication out of charity between your brothers and you, because you want to help them out of love? Teresa of Avila says you have to pray for them, but what is prayer? Isn't prayer carrying? Isn't it charity carrying your brothers and sisters, or is just praying for them? They're far away and I'm here, I'm praying for you. But a real prayer is carrying. I don't do it, but it's God who does it, you see? So the reality of sin here is there anyway. So God forbid it comes from the person herself or himself, but it's there. So it's not good to imagine the seven mansions as the top of the mountain. I think it's better to imagine the seven mansions now that we are talking about it. Maybe before it was good for you, but now I think it's important to see it also as not only union. I'm not removing the union, but I'm saying what Teresa of Avila says. Why do you think that God gives us this huge grace? I'm quoting Seven Mansions. I think it's chapter 4. Why do you think, she says to the reader, why do you think, my sister, she's talking to her sister, God gives us these graces? If not to follow the same steps of his mother, of himself, his son, Jesus, his mother, and the apostles, and how much they suffered. You see? So she gives us the answer. She says, the charity, the union with God brings us such a powerful charity, she says, that we become the slaves of our brothers and sisters. Slaves. I know the word is not politically correct, but it has nothing to do with that. It's the Bible, no? Slavery is sin. We become the slaves of our brothers and sisters. So you see the degree of humility and the degree of, it's Jesus, no? What did Jesus become? I am the master, and look, I am cleaning your feet. So I want you to clean the feet of your brothers and sisters. But what are the feet? The feet are the dirtiest part of the human being, normally. If you walk with sandals every day, in the end of the day, I'm not sure the sandals will be very clean, and your feet even less, with all the sweat, etc. So imagine the state of the feet. And you have to clean the feet of, not yours, but the feet of your brothers and sisters. You see, that's Jesus talking to us. So that's charity, he says. Love your brothers and sisters as I loved. But the way you love our brother, us, Jesus, is unbelievable. I am the master, but look how I behave. You see? So this is the seven mansions. So she says it's an awakening moment, no? It's like, why does God want to give us this grace? Of course, we want to be united with him, and this is enough by itself. But why, while we are here on earth, we want this grace? It's just to follow the footsteps of Jesus and to be able to be enabled by him living in us and moving in us, to continue the work of the application of redemption. Redemption is already achieved, but to apply it to our brothers and sisters. So, yeah. So you see, so I haven't answered your question about, like, if you've seen what will happen, but I gave you something in order to stop you from idealizing or seeing the seven mansion in a certain way. The seven mansion is already full of sin. It's already an immersion of sin, not ours, but it's already an immersion of sin. The more the charity of God grows, the more what we live is what Jesus lived, which is a descent, being God, becomes human, becoming slave, obedient till death. Philippians chapter 3, if I'm not wrong. You see what I'm trying to say? No worries. No worries, Marty. Go ahead. So you see, it's a descent. So the seven mansions is in fact a descent. This is why in the previous recording I said expect the discovery of greater weakness. Don't be surprised by your weakness, rejoice. But rejoice, throwing yourself in the arms of the mercy of God. The action of God in prayer, in the prayer of the heart, and all sorts of prayers, the action of God through the sacraments, paradoxically, is by removing all that is earthly, human, even spiritually human, or humanly spiritual, weakening us, making us poor of spirit. So leaning more, or if you prefer, leaning more and more on God himself. So as a consequence, this poverty makes us in the hands of God, malleable in the hands of God, and therefore then he uses us to continue his work of redemption. The service, the greatest service of God, is to take part in this work of redemption. It's not to preach, it's not to write, it's not to speak, it's not to do anything, any of this, even though it has to be done. I think it's deeper than all that. It's to allow God himself to grow in us, the charity of God grow in us. And what is charity? Charity is a union, not only with Jesus the head, but Jesus the body. When I say that the 7 mentions connects us to the first mentions, you may express it in a different way. The 7 mentions unite us with all Jesus. Jesus the head and Jesus the body. We usually forget Jesus the body. We want Jesus the head. We want the top of the mountain, Mount Tabor, of the Transfiguration. But we forget that we can't just be united with the head. We need to be united with the rest of the body. Union with Jesus, union with God is tremendous, is almost, I would say, is a scary thing, in the sense that you receive communion, you receive your brothers who are sinners. So in which state you are falling. So I'm sorry, I'm going too far in my explanation, but yeah. So now, if the person falls, but before the person falls, how does the person react to sin? That's an important point. Describing how, not how we sin, but how we bounce or come out of sin. If you follow the line of growth, you will notice that the person bounces more rapidly, becomes lighter, the more we grow. In the beginning, when, God forbid, of course, we're talking about sin, God forbid, but imagine the person sins, it could take 3 days, 10 days more for the person to accept to stand up and go back again and continue the journey and resume the journey, confession, whatever. Why? Because the impact of sin humiliates the person so much, the person is shocked, the person fears God, the person is depressed. So all these things, or some of them, makes the resuming the journey or going back to God makes it take longer time. The more we grow, the more we not only discover our weakness, but we learn to accept and love our weakness. Saint Therese says not only to accept, but to love our weakness, because it's like a magnet that attracts the grace of God. You see here, the understanding of God is completely different. Completely different. It's almost the opposite of what we would think. So the more we grow, the more we accept and love our weakness, we learn that, the more we discover the mercy of God, the less the sin has an impact in our life, paradoxically, in the sense that we bounce quickly. We fall, we bounce. Saint Therese would say, when an adult falls, it's dangerous, could break your hip, or if you're an old person, could break your hip, etc. But she says, when the little children fall, they stand up just like this, in a fraction of a second. They will cry a little bit, 2 seconds, and then they are up and running again, you see? She means by that, the little means the one who accepted his or her weakness, accepted the work of God. It's a work of destruction of all that is not God in us. Okay, I'm happy. Destroy all what that is not you in me. I'm happy with that. Because I want you. I don't want anything else. So if you find anything that is not you in me, well, please remove it. If you have mercy on me, but remove it. So if you go for that, You see, if you go for that, say, okay, God, go ahead. I don't fear that. I'm happy. You remove all what you want. It never harms. God never harms. It's just transformation. So it's very important to understand the suffering is not meant for itself. There is no harm at all. It's just a work of sanctification, of removing all that is not godliness. So the more we go in this direction, discovery and acceptance and love of our nothingness, and discovery of the overwhelming mercy of God to us, to me, it's personal. We bounce completely differently in front of any error or sin, God forbid, or anything else. Because the time is reduced, we don't have this second reflection of a sin, which I call the second sin. It's like, yeah, I sinned, but then I go back again to it and I lament the fact that I sinned and I cry, oh, how come I did this, I did that? But this is a second sin. You're losing time. Expose that sin to God. Show that sin to God. Shorten the time between the moment you fell and the moment you are back with God. Don't lose time. You see, don't lose time. So I'm answering your question, no? Of sinning, what will happen? I'm trying to guess what will happen. I can't give you an answer, but I'm trying to give you something that approach a little bit the reality. So I think that the bouncing is better, is different. So if you are talking about somebody who's in the seventh and does sin, God forbid, I would tend to believe that the bouncing is quicker and the coming back to God, and an extra learning of humility, no? Saint Therese says, I'm not surprised by my sin. I can sin. If God doesn't support me, I'm very weak. You can't imagine how weak I am. And her sisters are stunned. It's like, how can you say that? You seem so faithful, so strong, so adamant in many things that you are like a block of steel in front of us. And she says, no, you can't imagine. Every second, God, I lean on God's help. And if I do not accumulate any grace, all the graces are given just to live the moment. And I don't know what will happen in 2 minutes. And a sister talks to her about something in the future. She said, I can't be bothered of thinking of the future, because thinking of the future is like creating. It's not my job to create. I don't know what will happen, you see, which is true when you think about it, but she's in it, you see. So I think that the bouncing is different, and the best example is Therese. It's an extra learning of humility for the person, hoping that the person stays, doesn't go astray completely, but I don't know more than that. I'm not trying to take any position.
Thank you, John. I think what I learned from that is, well, there really is, as you exposed it earlier, there really is a different approach now when people, of course, what you said, they go down after reaching union. Of course, they follow their master. Jesus died for all of us, so they go do that. But in terms of handling all these weakness, sinfulness, all those things, there's really a difference between how they handle that. And I think you answered my question in the sense that you said, because the lingering question was, does the sin, or does the weakness, the error that happens to people in those stages, do they cancel out everything that they've done so far? But I think you said they resume. So I think that's when they bounce back. So I think that is a very helpful answer for all of us who are, praying to one day be there. And again, I as I said earlier, of course, maybe people who are up there, quote unquote, think differently now. They see God and weakness differently. So there's the disparity between how I personally see it, and them, and between how they see from the top of, like that.
Yeah.
So thank you for that answer.
You're welcome. If you don't mind, just underlining the fact that even in the stages before, when, God forbid, there is a sin, when we go to confession, the question is still there. Are we going back to square one, or are we going back to where we were? Say, for instance, not say, a person very well established in the fifth mansions, united, with the union of will, etc. Good life, good committed Christian, very fervent, etc. You would almost say a holy person, but still there is no. We haven't entered in the deepest purification, but it doesn't matter. Now, God forbid this person sins. No, but it can happen. Of course, it does happen. What is the outcome? I mean, after confession, are we back? Is the person back to square one, or back to where the person was? I would rather think, and this is, I think, reasonable, good theology, is to go back to where the person was, not to go back. So it applies also to previous stages. It doesn't apply only to. I never said it applies to the seven mansions. I'm just answering this reduced question now. If I go to confession, do I go back to square one, or do I go back to where I was? I would rather think that I go back to where I was, plus extra humility, hopefully, extra learning of my weakness, extra acceptance of my brothers and sisters, etc. The list is long.
Okay. Yeah, Sean, if I may comment on that, because I was able to formulate that question when I was studying Ensuring Steady Growth, and as you proposed to us and you showed us, it's a journey, right? So like a literal journey. If you fall in the journey, you don't like go back to your house, right, and start the journey again. So you just stand up where you fell. So thank you for clarifying that.
Of course, providing that there is no intention to go astray completely, because it's possible. Be careful, huh? Even in further stages, like for instance the deep purification, the dark night of the spirit. I think that there is a great possibility to fall into a great deviation of sort of like illuminism or false prophecy or just dealing with the devil, because the devil, God allows that, and this is normal, allows the devil to work in a very harsh way, and some temptations are present. The person stays free throughout the journey. So I do think that there is a possibility to go astray in the spiritual realm. We're not talking seven mansions, we're talking way before. I think there is possibility to go astray, because what happens is that it's part of the temptation, but it's not, is very rarely seen as a temptation or as a deviation, that some spiritual faculties can develop. Because entering in the spiritual world, the word spirit doesn't mean only God. It could mean three things at least. God himself purely loved and sought for himself. The spiritual goods, they are not God, and they are those that could open windows for danger. And the dark spirits, the dark spiritual side, the devil is there, the evil is there. It is spiritual not in the sense that it is divine, it is spiritual in the sense that it is not material, it is not visible. St. Paul himself says that the devil can appear in the clothes of light and like an angel, like a true angel. So, and God allows that. Why? Because what is at stake is the choice of the naked God, the choice of Jesus and the king, and not the money of the king or the goods of the king. So the choice between the narrow path in the middle, I'm talking about St. John of the Cross, the drawing of the mountain, and the road to the left, which is the imperfect spirit, which is seeking the spiritual goods, choosing between the two sometimes could be very difficult because one is very tempted by the promises of the devil. The war is fierce at this junction because the devil is offering you various possibilities of knowledge, of communication, of powers. And there are people who deviate at this junction, I think. They're not mentioned in the writings of our saints, but it could happen. Because the temptation is very big at this junction. You're not tempted by, I don't know, having a car or a house or some money or I don't know, or the earthly things. Here you are tempted by power, by spiritual power. Look how many leaders, spiritual leaders, fall into that trap. And you can even have an agreement with the devil. It's possible. I'm sorry, I'm becoming very dark, but I have to mention that. It's part of the challenges. Following Jesus is not going in this direction. The apostles were tempted by that. No, the discussion they had one day, following, I don't know, they were in front or in the back talking, and Jesus stops them and says, "What are you talking about?" And one of them says, very a bit embarrassed, saying, "We are talking who is the big one, who is the boss." Do you think that being involved in the spiritual world or in the church or in any movement in the church or anything, any group or whatever, doesn't bear a temptation? It does bear a temptation. Entering in the spiritual realm so deeply doesn't have dealings with invisible powers. God is not the only invisible power in this realm. We have all sorts of temptations. And the devil, God allows the devil to tempt us because he wants to see what do we exactly want. So the invisible, spiritual in the sense of invisible, is very wide. It's not God only. It's not because it's spiritual, then yes, it's good. No. Spiritual means non-material. So it could be, God is one of the things, but there are other things, and they are created. God is the only one non-created. The devil is created, he's an angel. And his hordes, they are his friends, no? Are created angels, no? Who fell. And then you have other goods. Temptation, prophecy, illumination, knowledge, glory, power, spiritual power. Don't you think it's tempting? It is tempting, spiritual power. It's a fact. We are human, and it's a fact. Why would you think that a spiritual person wouldn't be tempted? On the contrary, the person, spiritual pride, it's horrible, but it does exist. Of course it does exist. I know better than you, and I'm better than you, and I'm holier than you, and I this, and that. Oh my Lord. You see, it's part of the steps of the journey, you see. Why am I talking about all this? I forgot, sorry. Yeah, the sins. Plenty of sins, of possible sins, of possible deviations are there before reaching, before the achievement, with the purification mainly. We are still in the purification, all these temptations. So.
And also, I think sometimes, like, you know, during the temptations, as you're talking about, sometimes you can be given also like doubts about whether God exists or not.
Yeah.
You know, like you feel as though maybe you've wasted your whole life believing in something that maybe the atheist world was correct to say that, you know, is a myth. And that is an old myth and whatever, and God never existed. And then you feel like you've believed everything your whole life, and you've wasted your whole life in giving up everything for the one being that never existed. So it's quite tempting then at that time to give it up and follow the material world, because it's there and it's real and it's tangible.
Of course, and the God who is poor like when you contemplate Jesus' life, he's not promising anything material. On the contrary, the conditions for mission, the mission he entrusts his apostles are conditions of poverty, all sorts of poverty. No, don't take this, don't take two, don't take this, don't lean on this, don't lean on that, etc. The image of God shown by Jesus or presented by Jesus to us, of course, is not very appealing, humanly speaking. There is no richness, there is no goods, there is no power, there is no means. It's like the opposite, quite the opposite. So it's not very appealing. So you might reach a point where saying, well, this God is not very interesting. No, it's which sometimes people who are not Christians, without mentioning which religion they belong to, is a little bit their objection. No, it's like, how can you say that Jesus is God if this occurred to him, and look how he suffered and died? That cannot be God. Of course, I'm talking humanly, the human temptation, no, the thinking humanly. Of course, this is why St. Paul says that the cross is a completely foolish and crazy thing for the wise Greeks, and its weakness for the wise Jews. The believer, the Jew, always knew that God intervened with power, and now you show me a weak God. How can I believe in this God? That's not Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, Moses' God. So cross that, and I don't want that God. That cannot be God. And the Greeks want wisdom, etc. And look how Jesus ends up on a cross. So for them, that's where is the wisdom here? This is a crazy God. So, of course, if you look humanly, our God is a crazy God in the end of the day. Is a completely foolish, is completely, in a way, out of line. We made him very politically correct. Be careful, huh? We made the gospel very politically correct, but that's the danger of today, that we're following the spirit of the world and transformed the gospel into a very acceptable, politically correct option. Look at the morality, the Catholic moral teaching, the Catholic social teaching. That's fine. Yes, it's beautiful, it's fantastic, it's perfect. But now think of Jesus and what he's offering you. That's an utter, it's a little disaster, no? And nobody would like to present God this way. No, you want to present Jesus as a good person, as a, not good in the sense, good in the sense that like a beautiful master, an impressive teacher in our society. He is, of course, he's God, and he has all the wisdom, but I think that the means he chose and the end he chose are not very appealing for a politically correct mind. So, yeah. Okay. Did you have one more question, or Stephen, or?
One more.
Okay, go ahead. Since we are at it.
And I promise you, this will be the last, because the other ones that I sent you, you already answered them in Hilda's question. So, last question. I heard. I'm sorry, I'm not able to give you the specific book or whatever. I read of a priest who fell. Right, he fell. Maybe the impression was that I got was he was advanced maybe, and then he fell. And because he fell, he took it upon himself to live his whole life as a life of penance. At first, when I was reading that, I was like pretty impressed by what he did. But then with your teaching, and of course Saint Teresa's, teaching, I said, wouldn't that be a very, let me just say the word, maybe for lack of a better term, horrible life, to live your whole life in penance? Why not just, as you said, submit yourself to God. God, I sinned, and then just move forward and just live your life in the mercy of God, and just, you know, because life is, I think spiritual life also has to be life giving. I believe, because I could just imagine if he lived his whole life in with the back penance as a background. You know, was he all the time living in guilt? Everything he did, I don't know. So um, I don't know if you could comment on that,
Um,
because I believe a lot of people before live that kind of mindset that, oh, because I did something very bad, I, as a way of penance, I have to live my life a life of penance. What can you say about that?
I see your point, and I see their point. And we don't know personally this priest. We are not in his shoes, so we can't really decide. You have a point, but we don't know him, so we don't know what exactly happened. What are the reasons why he's living a life of penance? Um, Let me turn the question in a different way. Um, take a case of a priest who never fed, priest who stayed faithful, and then this priest decided suddenly to become a hermit. The hermit, take it the way you want. Is it a life of penance? Is it a life of praise? Is it a life of prayer? Doesn't matter. It's just a life where he seemed to extract himself from his previous service as a parish priest and say with the agreement of his bishop, now he's a hermit somewhere lost in somewhere in the nature, in the midst of the nature. So what is your evaluation of this choice? It's not because of sin, but still he is not serving as you expect him to serve, go back and serve as he was serving. So what is your take on it?
Yeah, because if he did not sin and just decided to become a hermit, and becoming a hermit entails more sacrifice and, you know, demands more of a rigorous life. So I think um, what he's doing is good, maybe that he decides that. I don't know. Of course, what you're saying is, I understand that. Yeah, maybe we don't know the context, why, what the example I gave, why he did that. But
And no,
no,
and we
maybe,
don't. Sorry.
sorry, maybe because I don't understand the term living a life of penance. Maybe I'm also the one who doesn't understand it. So that's why I saw it as something very guilt-filled, very like morose. He's always like crying, because that's how I saw it. So
Even if in a life of penance, you have dimensions that we don't always grasp fully. Let me take an example. When you read the early Desert Fathers, the literature is available to us. You can buy plenty of books with the apophthegma, which is the sayings of the Desert Fathers, the early monks and hermits in Egypt and Palestine, but more in Egypt than anywhere else. These are the first teachers of spiritual life. The first books, I would say, written on spiritual life are rather coming from this tradition. And very interestingly, when you read their lives and you try to understand what is their goal and how they end their life, like you say, okay, John of the Cross talks about a journey of growth, and then you reach to union. Teresa of Avila says, okay, you reach union, etc. So you want to ask them, what, how do you see the journey? Where are you heading toward? It is very surprising never find any indication of union with God. There is an indication of purity, and that the purity makes us see God. That's clear. John Cassian, in his conferences, he talks about that. That's the goal of, they tell him, the monks, the Egyptian monks tell him that the goal of spiritual life is to see God, and in order to see God, as it is said in the gospel, we need a pure heart. So our work is a work of purification. You have that also in the Byzantine monastic tradition also. But other than that, we don't have really a great development on the teaching of union with God or such things. Does it mean that it's not their plan? Maybe. What you find, on the other hand, is a little bit surprising and sort of leaves you still hungry for more, which is what you just mentioned, which is you find many of them, if not all of them, showing you as an ideal a life of penance, a life where they recite and pray the Psalms, and especially the tragic Psalms of David, where he says, I am in the depth of the filth or the abyss, and I'm asking, praying for God to have mercy on me and take me out of this abyss of darkness. So it seems, and I insist on seems, that the ideal according to them is just to be there in the depth and the bowels of the darkness and to beg for God's mercy. There is a parallel with a more recent monk, Orthodox monk from Mount Athos, who is called, what's his name? Very famous now, who died, of course, Sylvanus or Silwan, I don't know how you say it in Sylvanus, I don't know how you say it in English. In French it's Silwan. Siloé, Silwan, Sylvanus, I don't know. He's an Orthodox monk, probably saint already declared by the Byzantine Rite, I mean the Greek Orthodox Church. And what is interesting is that he asked Our Lady to teach him how to pray and how to acquire, more specifically, how to acquire humility. And one day she talked to him and said to him, dwell in hell and hope. Dwell in hell and hope. Of course, it is very shocking to hear that, especially for our Western minds, even though you are in the East, but it's you receive the Western mind rather than the Eastern. The Eastern, what I mean by Eastern is the eastern side of the Mediterranean, not your area. What does it mean to dwell in hell? And what does it mean after that to hope? And to hope for what? In fact, to hope for the mercy of God. Paradoxically, if you look closer, you'll find that it is exactly the ideal of the Egyptian monks. Almost literal, word by word. I am in the filth, it says one of the Psalms, and I am asking for salvation. God save me from that darkness, that filth where I am. Now, the simple interpretation is, as you said, well, life of penance, no? He considers himself a sinner, he remembers his own sins, and of course, when you remember the sins, you shouldn't shut yourself in yourself. You need to open to the mercy of God and beg for this mercy, no? This is the prayer, Jesus' prayer, no? Jesus, Son of God, pray for, have mercy on me, sinner. It's throughout your life, you say that, have mercy on me, sinner. It seems to be this interpretation. I have, and this is me only here talking, I have a further interpretation here, even though they never mention it, sorry. I think that without developing it more, I think it is a state of union with Jesus, And it is the state of union with Jesus who is the Redeemer, who goes to hell to save people from hell. Is Isaiah 11. People who walked in the darkness in the land of death saw a new light. That's the mechanism. I am in that country. I dwell in hell, which means I dwell with my brothers and sisters. They are not charity makes them close to me, makes me close to them. The charity of God makes me close to the sinners, not far from them. As St. John of the Cross says, the purer you are, the less scared or stunned by sin you are, because you know your weakness. The purer means you are weak. It means you know your weakness. You know you can fall. So paradoxically, you are closer to your brothers and sisters. You understand them from within, not by talking to them, but from within. You understand them. You have a different understanding of the human being. So I think that somewhere, somehow, these monks who apparently spend their entire life, tens and tens of years, begging God to save them, well, which sin are they committing? Give me the sin. I mean, apparent sin. There are no sins. They're monks. They're living in the desert. So what? Apart from spiritual sins, the physical sins, there are no physical sins. You see what I'm trying to say? So, but they still say, where I am in the faith. And apparently they left everything and they went in the desert. So apparently the cities have no meaning for them. I'm not sure about that. I think that there is a deep mystical connection between them and the cities, and the city, people, the rest of the people. No? They used to call Alexandria the city of sin, the big city. And let me tell you a story. Saint Anthony, this is a story that you find in very few manuscripts, but it's there. I read it in the book and then found it in the series of Apophthegms. Saint Anthony, at the height of his growth, Saint Anthony is the founder of all monks, father of all monks of Western Eastern. He is Egyptian. He lived close to the Nile. Then one day his parents have died. He enters in the monastery, he enters in the church, his parish church. He hears the gospel, leave everything, sell everything and go and come and follow me. He does that. He puts his sister with some nuns, etc. And then he secures her future. And then he goes to the desert step by step. So he's in the Nile. So you go east. So you go on going toward the Red Sea. Step by step, step by step. The story is written by Saint Athanasius, who was the patriarch of the Coptic church at that time. The church was united with the rest of other churches. Saint Anthony is a great example, and this story is about him, and it's very interesting. He is already in his cave somewhere closer to the Red Sea in a mountain, living as a hermit, and there is another hermit called Paul. He prays God and says, what am I supposed to do now? It's like I reached the maximum. What am I supposed to do now? I want to progress in my spiritual life. So you are allowed to think he might be very united with God. You want to call it seven mansions, you want to call it top of the mountain, you want to call it the way you want, that's you. God appears to him or tells him, Anthony, go to Alexandria, which is like telling the holy man to go to the city of sin. It's like go to the red district of your city. He accepts, he goes, he takes his stick and goes, and this is a very long journey, by the way. You are going from the Red Sea, crossing the Nile, and then you go to Alexandria, who is on the Mediterranean. He reaches the big city, and then God guides him to a shoemaker. He sits there beside the shoemaker and watch him, because God says to him, this guy is better than you. So you're supposed to learn something from him. He's a lay person and he's a shoemaker. Imagine. The monk, the great monk, father of all the monks, right and left, He's now learning from a shoemaker in Alexandria, the city of sin. Then he watches him. I always get emotional when I tell this story. He watches the shoemaker and asks him, what do you possess? So the shoemaker tells him, I possess this little shop, I have this and that. So St. Anthony says to himself, I left everything. I am poorer than him, so it's not about poverty. Then he asks him, how do you fast? You know, fasting is an important part of our tradition. Now in the West, we forgot about fasting. We don't know what it is, so forget about that now. But it's in the Eastern churches, you still know what is fasting. So ask him, how do you fast? So the guy tells him, I do this, I do that, etc. And of course, Anthony, who hardly eats anything during the day, says, okay, well, I beat him. He's very far. I mean, I'm beyond that. And then he says, how do you spend your day? And here comes the story, the crux of the story, what he's supposed to learn. He says, in my shop, I look at people crossing, going and coming. And I say to myself and to God, all these people, they will go to heaven. And I will go to hell. Because they are better than me. That's interesting for the monk, because the temptation for the monk is to think that he's better than the others. And there is something to learn here. He says, no, they are better than me. Where are you, shoemaker? I am in the city of sin. I am in the big city of Alexandria. You have people from all countries, all languages, all ethnics. They will all go to heaven and I will go to hell. And then some women, I leave you to think who these women, which category these women belong to. He said, and these women said the same. They will go to heaven, I will go to hell. Anthony said, that's something new to me. Took his stick and went back for a few more years in his cave to continue his journey. What did he learn from the man? He's not staying in hell and hoping. That guy was saying, I'm going to hell, they're going to heaven. So he's sending them to heaven. I want to comment on that. I will leave it to you because God can illumine you more than of course, infinitely more than I can do. And it's better to leave it open. But that's the story. You can find the story in some of the manuscripts. And I find that story amazing because that's the story of a monk who very probably had reached the top of everything. He is the father of all monks on top of all that. So that story is paradigmatic. No, it's a paradigm for everybody. No, it's not just one among others. He's the father of all monks. So supposedly this story should be part of our central books. And God says, this shoemaker is better than you. You will learn something from him. What did he learn? I leave it to you. I won't say more. So you see, it's not only a life of penance. He's sending himself to hell and sending them to heaven. He is the one who's doing this, not them. He is doing it. He decided these women will go to heaven. Oh, this shoemaker is a real monk. So, on that beautiful note, let us hope for the mercy of God. Penance is multifaceted. Don't take it only as a sad decision. Penance could be something as beautiful as what this shoemaker said, or this other Byzantine monk, Silvan or Silvanus, I don't know how you say it in English, did it. It's something very, very, very deep. So it's not just penance. The exterior cover is penance, but when you go deep inside, it's like how can you live the entire day, every day, all your life saying, God, so forgive me for what I have done? You know it or you don't know it, be careful. You might not know it and had a life of penance, pure penance as you think, but in fact, with unknowingly, you took part of the redemption of your brothers and sisters. So you thought just try to get acceptance of the mercy of God, but unknowingly you were carrying all your brothers and sisters who probably fell in the same sin of yours, but in fact you were invoking the mercy of God on yourself, on the others. And also I would advise you to watch this very, very beautiful movie. It's a Russian movie. It's pure monastic, Orthodox or Eastern, better. I prefer to say Eastern instead of saying Orthodox. Eastern monasticism. It's called The Island.
The Island.
I cry. I don't know if you have seen it. I cry when I see this movie because it's exactly what we are saying. You will find a monk who is even despised by all his brothers and brothers, because there are no sisters. It's a monk, so they are all brothers. Absolutely despised, the one who has the least jobs to do, etc. And that prayer, God have mercy on me, he becomes that prayer. He doesn't look a holy man, but he is. You discover throughout the movie that he's a really, real holy man. That he's probably very advanced, but he doesn't look like that at all. You have even monks in Egypt till now who fake craziness.
Really?
Because they don't want you to get close to them. If you visit the monastery and see them, they will act as if they are crazy.
Oh.
Yeah. So you will say, "Oh, this guy is completely bonkers." You will not draw closer to them, but in fact, they are probably the best ones. But they don't want you to get close to them. It's a tradition, also one of the traditions. There are plenty of traditions. Anyway, so monasticism is not only the Western one. You can look at the Eastern one. It's very interesting. Okay. So on this beautiful note of
I like your story about the shoemaker, and just to quickly comment on my idea. Maybe he was the one hoping for those women, as you said, like, right? They are in the Bibles, and then their hope, and then Saint Stanislas.
More than hoping, he was sending them.
Sending them, yeah.
You have great power over God when you are united with God. So if you are clever enough, you use that power to continue to save the world or participate in the application of salvation that already happened. So sorry, I stopped. I interrupted you. I'm so sorry, but I think it's very deep. He is sending them as if he's God.
Yeah.
If he's Christ. This evening you are with me.
Yes.
And remember me, O Lord. He said, this evening you are with me. So he is an extension of Jesus. He is united to Jesus, and he continues. He might not be aware of it, but the charity of God is moving him. So he says, no, I want them in heaven. I have pity. I pity them. I am the embodiment of mercy, and I don't want them to be lost. I pray for them. Thank God I didn't go emotional, because usually I can't finish usually that story, but thank God I was able to finish it. But usually
I felt your emotions. I felt your emotion.
Because it's very deep. It's overwhelming. It's beautiful. This is God and His
word. Especially when we talk about spiritual things, we think about the holy ones as, we have a certain picture or paradigm about them, but your story shows that it's, and anyone, and you need to really know people to find out and uncover, wow, they're really united with God, and they may not know it. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, God. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. God bless you. And let us say one Hail Mary to ask for God's mercy. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, Hilda. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Hilda. Thank
all
you.
the others, and for all the people who will be maybe benefiting a little bit, so they can pray for us. Thank you.